So my first question is like how your filmmaking journey started, like when you thought about becoming a filmmaker and how the journey started.
I grew up in Sri Lanka. I was born and raised in Sri Lanka, and I was really interested in drawing and illustration, and I thought that was what I wanted to do. Um, and then I simply just got bored with it, and I started thinking about other ways to um, express myself creatively. And I kind of accidentally fell into film. I was just it was just something that uh, interested me, and I just kind of ran with it. But I didn't really have a camera or anything until um, I was much older. But once I was in university, I started experimenting with video cameras, and it just kind of went from there.
So have you gone to film school and as a filmmaker, does it help to go to film school or it doesn't help?
I did go to film school. Uh, I went to UCSD, UC San Diego, and I studied in their arts program, which is not explicitly a cinema program. It's kind of a broad arts program, but um, and that was quite interesting because I was exposed to all kinds of uh, artistic disciplines, but I kind of leaned towards cinema ultimately. Um, and then I went to Cal Arts to get another arts degree, but more focused on cinema. That was a graduate's degree, an MFA. But as for if it helped, I mean, that's a complicated question. I think it does help in some ways. Um, you know, it it certainly does help, and it does help you in terms of networking and just having a space to be creative and to just think about your work and train and uh, kind of bounce ideas off of professors and your peers. Um, and to be exposed to different writings and films that are quite interesting. Um, but it's quite expensive to go to university, so that's really the only thing I would say. But sure, I think it is worth it.
So your recent film, Your Touch Makes Other Invisible. So how the idea came for the story?
So that comes from my childhood, really, because I grew up during the Civil War in Sri Lanka, and I've been making films in that context about Sri Lanka and the socio-political situation, um, particularly the Civil War and the reverberations of the Civil War, and just kind of the culmination of those interests. Um, and it's also my first feature film, and it kind of uh, addresses a lot of the things. Well, it kind of builds upon a lot of the curiosities I've had as an artist for the past decade that I've been making work. Um, but it's just something I've been working on and off for quite some time. But it kind of really solidified in the last seven years, maybe, uh, as a as a project with uh, that seemed possible. So yeah, and of course, the pandemic kind of slowed things down, but it's an idea I've had for quite some quite some time.
So it's a docufiction, is it documentary or a fiction or is it both?
It's a hybrid documentary. I suppose you could say it's a docufiction. And yeah, it mixes. Um, it is at its heart a documentary. It has observational documentary, testimonies, real life testimonies. But within that, um, there are stretches of narrative fiction that kind of blends together with the nonfiction elements, seamlessly, sometimes not so seamlessly. Yeah, it's very much a hybrid film.
So as a film, like for a documentary film, like how hard it is to get a funding and how do you get the funding for this film?
It, it can be difficult to get funding, particularly with first feature. Never mind a short film. Short films are almost impossible to get funding, and you often have to self-fund, um, or very small grants here and there. I've always self-funded my shorts, and I've made about 20 of them. Um, but this feature definitely needed funding, so and that's why it took so. That's why features often independent features often take a very long time to make. It's usually a very extended funding process. But I was quite lucky because I was able to get some grants, which led to private investments and other grants and labs and things like that. So, but as far as like how do you get funding, it's a long, boring process of writing applications that look very similar to each other, and it just sometimes takes months and years and to put together a budget, so you can shoot and do post production properly, and yeah.
Okay, so the funding part is for different processes like shooting process and post production process. Like were there funds like that were only for like how many time it took to like to get those funds? How many years you can say?
Um, I mean, it's still happening, because money runs out, and then you get more money, and then money runs out, you get more money, and we're still in that. My team and I are still in that process. Um, but we had enough money to um, initially you get funding to develop the film, which could be research, it could be the initial shooting phase, or elements of pre-production, blend into development, which could be uh, the initial stages of casting, whatever it is, locations, um, and then you move into the production phase, which is, the most important, kind of biggest, most robust phase. Um, and then you move into post production. So, there are a number of grants that cover the different phases. There are development grants, um, production grants, post production grants. So you find yourself applying to different grants at various stages. So it's not like you apply for everything at the same time. You're often applying throughout the life of a film, um, even up until distribution, which is, what I'm approaching at this stage, anticipating the festival premiere. Um, so yeah, it's kind of like that. But there are, um, those are grants. There are obviously other ways um, to add to the pool of funds that you have, including investments, private investments, things like that. So,
So how was the making of it? Like how difficult was the shoot and how many crew members were there?
we were shooting in an area that was kind of, um, uh, not entirely safe to shoot in. and so it was a bit complicated. Um, I'm talking about the north of Sri Lanka, um, you know, Jaffna, Kilinochie, these areas, which, used to, during the war, it was a part of the country that belonged to the rebels, the Tamil Tigers. And, it's a complicated area um, to shoot in, especially, at the time. But uh, I had a crew. I had quite um, probably a bigger crew than people would think. I had, trying to think, maybe uh, definitely over 10, maybe less than 15. Um, so, that's I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's pretty small, but um, it's also it can be quite big. I've had crews that are just me and one other person, so crews can really vary, depending on the project and the budget. Um, yeah,
And what was the post production like? The editing phase and the sound phase. How was the process there?
that was quite well. Well, I edited the film myself, and I finished that. It took me many months to truly finish the edit. Actually, um, maybe maybe a little less than a year to true. Well, actually, no. It took me maybe a few months to finish the edit, and then there was color correction and scoring the film, um, and then making small adjustments and subtitling the film, and just the different um, stages of post production. But it was done relatively fast, I suppose, because we finished post production in, I guess, less than a year, or a year or something like that. Um, but it was quick. It was um, mostly fine. It wasn't as it's a stage that I like in filmmaking because uh, everything is in the can, everything is done. Um, there's really just uh, the task of putting everything together like a puzzle, which I like. Shooting is just the most difficult thing, in my opinion.
So it's going to have a premiere at Rotterdam. So what are your expectations from the festival and the audience reaction from there?
Uh, I screened uh, I screened a couple of films at Rotterdam at this point. I've attended once, um, and so I sort of know what to expect, though I've never brought a feature there. Um, so, maybe it's a little different. And I'm screening a short film and a feature this time. Uh, but so I'm, I'm excited. I think the audience, um, I'm just excited to put the film out there and to discuss the film with audiences. And, I'm just happy it's, screening at this incredible festival. And, I get to meet people who are excited to see the film and who can think about uh, what the film is trying to say, um, and to reflect on that, and to engage in a discourse, I suppose. Yeah, but I'm also trying not to have too many expectations. I think um, um, I'm just trying to um, I'm really just excited to bring the film there, um, to present the film there, really.
Okay, okay, okay. Great. So, if you could tell the little bit about the story of the film, like, who doesn't give too much of it.
Yeah, it's it kind of has uh a kind of a strange structure, you know. It kind of it's kind of an experimental film in some ways. Um, it has um you know, at the heart of it, it's a story about a woman who loses her son to a supernatural force that's kind of plaguing her community, and you kind of don't know what this force is, but it's kind of manifested in different ways in the film. And in it's kind of um, in the larger context of the film is the story of the enforced disappearances of uh, Tamil people during the Civil War, particularly towards the end of the Civil War, you know, which is quite substantial. And so, you know, the fictional narrative thread of this woman who loses her son, that's kind of a, you know, has the science fiction element to it. It's kind of an allegorical reflection of the reality of this kind of it lives alongside this documentary investigation of missing persons um, in the North. It all takes place in the North. Um, and you know, it's kind of episodic in in a way. Um, you know, the structure is, like I said, um, kind of experimental, but it does have, you know, it's a mixture of testimonies, observational documentary, like I said, and also narrative fiction, sort of coalescing together into kind of um, this seamless kind of stream. Um, and it also incorporates news footage, manipulations of uh, significant uh, historical artifacts, um, etc. Yeah.
So, are there any films and filmmakers that have influenced you a lot?
Um, yeah, I think uh, the one that immediately comes to mind is Manny Cole. He's a huge influence of mine. Um, um, Also, um, God, I mean, this is like an easy question and a hard question. I think Fassbinder is an influence of mine. Uh, Also, Jacques Tourneur, Antonioni, Hitchcock, um, and I mean, I could go on and on, I suppose. Nathaniel Dorsky. Um, yeah, I mean, I have so many. I mean, I have so many.
Any filmmaker from Sri Lanka?
Yeah, of course, Lester James Peary is a huge influence on me, of course. Um, and Handagame, you know, I definitely saw all these films with Tanage, Prasanna with Tanage. You know, I grew up kind of watching these films. So, I'm a huge fan, definitely. I'm sure I'm influenced by them in significant ways, um, for sure. Um, yeah, and Sumitra Piris as well.